Are you a woman standing at a crossroads, eager for change? It's time to connect with your authentic and empowered self at Boss Leap. Join Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker in this empowering community where real-life stories of courageous and talented women inspire and motivate. Engage in honest conversations that foster well-being, drawing from our own journeys. Let us guide you toward profound growth and transformation in both your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker.
Welcome to Boss Leap. My name is Dr. Sylvia Morris, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Angela Walker. And today we had an awesome conversation with Gail Warrior. Before we get into this, we are going to talk about mentorship because, Angela, I went to the hair salon the other day. As you can tell, every episode, my hair
I was going to say it's
different.
fly.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I like my crochet.
I like it.
And I walked in, and there was this young woman sitting in the chair, and she was holding the flyer for our book, The Game Plan, A Woman's Guide to Becoming a Doctor and Living a Life in Medicine.
Wow.
So over a year ago, I made these flyers. I put them up at the hair salon just in the event that someone would see them and pick it up. Come to find out, this young woman was graduating from medical school the next day. I think, literally the next day.
Oh my goodness.
And she shared that her boyfriend had broken up with her, had come from a distant place to break up with her like 3 days before her medical school graduation. She mentioned that her match experience had not been that great and that she had to scramble to identify a position, which she did, thank God.
So matching for residency
for
training.
residency, yes. And that she did not match in the residency that she had envisioned matching in. And I believe her 30th birthday was somewhere around there too. So there were all these things at once. And I listened and I looked at her and I said, this is going to be okay. I was like, this feels like the worst thing possible. I shared sort of how I thought my life was going to be a little bit different in Seattle, and that didn't quite pan out. And you feel as if the weight of the world is on top of you. But I felt good because I felt like I was at the right place at the right time to help bolster this young woman as she moves into the next part of her life. Tell me, are there any times where someone said something to you or you were able to be at the pivotal place for someone to support them?
Yeah, but I'm going to comment on what you just did in that, number one, you were open, but you also kind of put things in place for that conversation to happen. And that was being proactive and having you've done something good. You've written a book to help others.
Fantastic. Yes, we did.
To help others, but you're actually still trying to help others in having that information readily available for somebody. She picks it up and you walk in. But then she has to be open to the conversation, right? Because some people are closed and can't accept any conversation about life and what's going on. So good for you and good for her. That's a beautiful story. For me, there's so many, in terms of mentors, I don't believe I've ever necessarily sought out a mentor like I would recommend that my kids do or young people do. I certainly have gleaned so much from, so many people in my life, men and women in medicine and outside of medicine. I think what I reflect back on when I was in residency is where I remember the first having mentors. And that's because I was pregnant in residency and having my first child. And I luckily had two female OBGYNs that had kids. And actually one was having hers soon after me. But they were just really reassuring. Like, this is going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You'll work it out. You'll figure it out. You might not have all the answers right now. You will feel overwhelmed, but you will have to set boundaries in terms of your life. Not necessarily, I didn't learn about setting boundaries in terms of how much work and how I could do it. And, some of it was just self-taught, unfortunately.
Trial and error.
Yeah. And then I think another, the mentor was, learning to, we can talk about Dr. Rhonda Maddox. When we first entered into Boss Sleep, or the thoughts around Boss Sleep. Actually, at that time, we didn't even have Boss Sleep podcast. We were talking about our book, The Game Plan, and I was starting, my business with healthcare, or health style rather, for, coaching and speaking. And she was very much an advocate of, selling your product, selling yourself, so that people know what you have to offer. If you have something that is meaningful and you feel like you could share something, powerful with other people, people are not just going to hear about it by word of mouth just because you are talking to me. You have to be able to market yourself and sell that. So that was interesting, coming from who I consider her a mentor. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but those are the thoughts that come to mind for me.
Absolutely. And just to say that you were a resident, an OBGYN resident, and you were pregnant, that's more than a notion. So I'm glad that you were in an environment that they said, okay, you're going to figure this out, because not all programs are particularly supportive, especially, when we trained, 25 years ago.
Sure. And I will add that we'll hear it in the conversation, but I was intrigued by Gail Warrior, our guest, who we'll introduce in just a moment, who is a woman of many accomplishments. She spoke about a mentor, early on in her career. And I think it's just incumbent upon us to remember that there are people that are maybe a step ahead of us. And we have to seek the information and not be timid. If there's something that you want to achieve, you've got to, be vocal and ask for that, or just to observe and listen.
Yeah.
So
she talked about, certainly, people do business with people that they know, like, and trust.
Yes.
And we will hear more from Gail Warrior after.
Yes. So would love to just let the audience know the background of Gail Warrior, who is an accountant by training. She was an executive with a major, Mobil Oil, and serial entrepreneur, and now an expat with so much advice for people that are interested in exploring a life outside in global traveling. So without further ado, we'll give you Gail. All right. So we are back and so excited to have Gail Warrior as our guest today. As we mentioned in the intro, she is a woman that has so many accomplishments at such a young age. We really didn't know, how to, devise our questions, because there's so much that we want to know. But we always like to start in the beginning, Gail, just by obviously welcoming you, but getting to know a little bit about who you were growing up, maybe what life was like, what you wanted to be.
Well, first of all, Angela and Sylvia, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. That's an interesting question. Who was I growing up, and who did I want to be? Well, I came from a family of one entrepreneur and one person who worked in corporate America. So my dad started off as a school teacher before I was born, actually, and then worked his way into Mass Mutual selling insurance. And then he became one of the first independent African-American insurance agents in Dallas. And my mom worked in
And give us a time frame, because that must have been in the 60s and 70s.
That was in the
Huge.
60s and 70s.
That says a lot. Okay.
And he had most of the successful African American entrepreneurs. He had their life insurance or health insurance or business insurance. He took care of all of their needs. So I grew up in that environment, right? And my mom, talk about 60s and 70s. She worked in corporate HR and at Texas Instruments.
Oh, wow. My
And
first
TI.
calculator was a TI.
That's right.
Not TI, but
The
a
big one.
TI.
And so you can imagine some of the, dinner conversations. At
Yeah.
dinner, she would always talk about, I'd saved TI from another lawsuit today. They just don't even realize because she handled all the EEOC claims,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
So people
wow.
that would want to come in and sue Texas Instruments over whatever. And I think she talked many employee off the ledge of, going down that road. So,
Mhm.
dinner conversation at our house was always very interesting. I grew up on a street called Mackshan Road in Dallas.
Oh.
And Mackshan Road was a street of entrepreneurs and teachers and doctors and lawyers that were all African American.
Wow.
And that was my bubble, right? And so that street was contained in far North Dallas. And
Okay.
it was a great street to grow up on. And then I went to school, took the bus to school to Skyline, 86 Raiders. I have to give us a shout
Yeah.
out.
Same.
And so growing up, I think I wanted to be a CPA, actually. I wasn't really thinking about entrepreneurship. I worked in my dad's company in the summer times. And so I thought my path was going to be certified public accountant. So I went to school, majored in accounting. I went to an HBCU, Clark Atlanta University, came
Okay.
back home. And I came back home mainly because my dad had fallen ill. So he developed cancer and passed at a very early age. And then that track of, wanting to, set for the Becker exam to get certified, and it just didn't seem to be as important anymore. And so I wanted to be close to home and started working at Mobil Oil, but in accounting.
Okay. Wow.
So you
So
just gave us a lot in that
exactly.
opening, and I just want to take a few steps back.
Sure.
You mentioned that you went to Clark Atlanta University. Can you tell us about your experience at an HBCU and how that helped to guide your career going forward?
Oh, without a doubt. Before Skyline, so growing up in North Dallas, and even though I lived on Mackshan, where everyone was African American, everyone in the neighborhood around us didn't look like me, right? So elementary school, junior high school, I had very few friends that looked like me. And
And
I
was there
really,
integration or busing, or how was that? I'm from
there,
Los
there was
Angeles, so
okay, there was integration, but in the public schools in North Dallas at that time were primarily the people who lived in that neighborhood. And during that time, it was primarily white or maybe a few Hispanic, but primarily Caucasian and a speckling of African Americans, right? And so that was my upbringing until I got to Skyline. And well, really elementary school, because elementary school I went to a tag program and I started being
a
bused in
what program?
tag,
Talented and
talented and
gifted.
gifted,
Okay,
talented and
thank you.
gifted program. And I started being bused. And then I realized that there was this divide, right? Because I didn't know the difference. I was just a kid. And by the time I got into junior high, I felt like I was being pulled to make a choice of, what set of friends that I wanted to have. And I was like, well, what difference does it make? So fast forward, when I went to an HBCU, oh my gosh, and I met amazing people that look like me from the West Coast, from the East Coast. There was a DC Metroplex club, there was a LA club, there was a Texas club. And there was just all of these amazing, super smart people that were Black. And I was like, oh my God, I've gone to the Mecca. And I remember when I came home for Thanksgiving, the first semester, my mom says to me, she says, "You've changed." there's something different about you. And I think what it was is just being a little bit more confident in myself, confident in who I am as an African American woman. Um, and I would never exchange my experience at a HBCU for anything in the world. I really think it shaped and developed me to who I am today.
Well, we hear that thread throughout a lot of our interviews and appreciate that perspective. So, I mean, what I'm hearing so far are positive, positive, positive inputs in your life. And if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, I'm not sure that you have any advice because it sounds like you had a really great trajectory from from the onset. But do you have any maybe one piece of advice that you give that 20-year-old Gail?
I thought about that question earlier, and I would say don't be as naive as I think I was. When I was at Mobil, I had great people that I worked with. I worked with a lot of women of all nationalities. My boss was a female. And I thought that, okay, this is how, corporate is. This is how, working in corporate America or just, everyone got along and it was, there was always some, what I call water cooler conversation or office politics.
Sure.
But I didn't feel, particularly at an HBCU, and I didn't feel when I worked at Mobil, a lot of discrimination, right? And I would say when I started my first business, that's when it was like, whoa, you know, so when you're growing up in a home and your dad is an entrepreneur, I heard a little bit of it in the background from my mom, who worked with the EEOC claims at Texas Instruments.
Sure.
But I think I would tell my 20-year-old self, that the life that you had growing up is an anomaly and not the norm.
So be prepared.
Be prepared. Yeah,
Um,
definitely be prepared for what's to come.
You actually kind of prompted my next question anyway. You went from I think you're a senior accountant at Mobil Oil and then went into entrepreneurship. Can you tell us was there a pivotal experience that shifted your idea into going into entrepreneurship?
Well, there was. So Mobil had merged with Exxon at the
Oh, I
time.
remember that.
Yeah, so we merged with Exxon, and my position was relocating to Houston. And I had a choice of taking a great package or moving to a very more humid city than Dallas.
Much more.
And I thought Dallas is home and I'm staying right here. And so I took the package.
Excellent.
I ended up, it's interesting because what I thought I was going to do was to start owning franchises, which I think people that do that, it's a great career path. But I remember having dinner with a mentor of mine who said, and the franchise that I was looking into was Smoothie King.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Love Smoothie King, still love
King.
And so I'm at dinner with he and his wife, and he says, why would you want to make your money one smoothie at a time?
Oh,
And I thought,
interesting.
wow, right? Because when you think about the cost of a smoothie and what you're selling it for, I mean, you'd have to sell a whole lot of smoothies to really make a living. And really you'd have to have more than one Smoothie King over time to make it viable. And I thought, you're right, I don't think I want to do that. And so an opportunity presented itself. He and his wife ran a modular manufacturing facility.
Okay.
And we had a conversation about the fact that no one at that time, so this is late 90s, was selling modular construction to the federal government.
And can you tell us, I'm not an engineer at any stretch of the imagination, what exactly is modular construction? I
So
think mobile homes.
I give people the visual of if you grew up in the 70s or 80s in public school, at some point in time, you probably had a class and a portable building.
Yes.
Oh, out in the
And
portables.
so the
Got it. Okay.
portables are a type of modular building. But when you make them permanent, so I did a lot of work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We built modular barracks, multi-story modular barracks. And so imagine taking a portable building, much higher quality, putting them together and then stacking them, for
Wow.
simplicity like Legos, and then putting a real roofing system, doing all of your MEP construction at the bottom. And then you put your facade on the outside, and voila, you've got a modular building.
Did you know anything about construction or modular buildings? How did you
Right.
have the internal confidence to say, I can do this?
Well, I had taken, so while I was at Mobil, I did my master's, and I took a couple of construction management courses.
Oh,
Okay.
And so I knew a little bit, but in regards to specifically manufacturing and the modular manufacturing, everything I learned boots on the ground, right? And so the first almost a year that we had started the business, we worked out of their office. And so we were working with another company who was actually 8A certified.
What certified?
8A. So the 8A certification is certification through the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and it's an incubator program to help small businesses to grow and develop and learn how to do business, not only with the federal government, but just learn about the art and process of contracting and the whole RFP process. So initially, we were working with that company and kind of like their sales and marketing arm to help them, find more contracts that were modular. So I wasn't really building at the beginning myself. Then they ended up what you would term graduating early out of the program, meaning that they weren't meeting the requirements by the SBA to stay in the program.
Okay.
And so then I decided, well, we should get in the risk game. We should, I can do this. I had been learning on the ground for about 3 years at that point, and I thought, oh, I got this. I've been sitting in the office of their manufacturing and kind of seeing how everything was being built, and I thought, easy peasy. So I thought.
I mean, just amazing. I mean, what you did, because I remember, following you back then. I think I ran into you at some point where our kids were really little, and you told me a little bit about, and I was just as awed then as I am now about what you were doing at that point in time, because I had no clue. And so how do you make that business transition then, as, not really knowing, into this huge, wildly successful business that you can then sell? I mean, what is that process like?
A lot of sleepless nights.
Got it.
A lot of sleepless nights. There were moments literally I would, looking back, because we were slowly adding more employees, right? And so at the height of the company, we had over 50 employees. We had offices in Dallas and then also in 2 other states. I had also decided to go a little bit more vertical, and we acquired a modular manufacturing facility. Because one of the challenges when you build modular, if you have a project that's going up in, say, California, well, if your manufacturing facility is on the East Coast, that's a lot of transportation costs
Yes.
that you have to transport that building. So, it was slowly and gradually. There were days where I was literally, would say, robbing Peter to pay Paul, not knowing if we were going to be able to make payroll. I remember my first office when we moved out of officing with the manufacturer. I moved into a tiny office, being the first person to answer the phones. And we didn't have a conference room, so we had about 4 people working for us. and our boardroom was literally in the middle of the floor. So everyone would take their chair and we'd pull it around in the circle. But I think one of the things that I've really relied heavily on is some of the processes and procedures that I learned not only from my dad, but also from Mobil, right? So always had an employee handbook, even when we just had a few people, right? I always made sure that we followed, that we had a creed that we followed through. And I always believed, and I still believe, that if someone calls you, that you should call them back or you should email them back, even if you tell them, "I don't have an answer for you right now. Give me a
Yes.
minute. I just want you to know I've gotten your message. I've gotten your call. I'll get back to you." And so I think customer service goes a very long way. And I think that's one of the things that in a lot of ways is missing in the world right now. Really quality, just communication and customer service. When we started doing much larger projects, the issue was bonding, right? And so I remember the first project that we had was in
You said Bondi,
bonding,
B-O-N-D.
bonding.
It's so that's
Bonding the modulars?
finances.
No, bonding, getting financing so
Okay.
that it
Remember,
would
we're doctors. We don't.
Right.
We have no idea.
So when you do a much larger project, the customer or the owner wants to make sure that if you go belly up, then there's a safeguard. So a lot of times,
Licensed and bonded.
yes.
Okay, I'm with you. Okay.
And so I was banking at the time with a bank. I won't name who that bank is. I don't bank with them anymore. I had been banking with them for about 5 or 6 years. We've been growing slowly and had an opportunity to do a much larger project. It was our first really large, it was like a $20 million project. And I needed some financing. And so I went to this bank that I had always been very successful with, and they said no. And
Because
I
you're a
thought,
woman, because I'm just going to say it, because you're a Black woman, because they say you didn't have enough time in the industry, all the usual stuff.
all of the above,
Okay.
But now this is a government project, right? And we had asked for certain projects with the government, if you ask, you have to file a lot of paperwork for them to pay you basically seed money up front to get mobilized and get started, then they would do that. And so we had already gone through that process. We were waiting for that to happen. And the bank said, nope, can't help you. And so now here I am thinking, well, now
Please tell me you took all your money out that day.
I did.
You withdrew all your money.
I did. I did.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the really funny part to that is my son Corey at the time, he was little. He was probably 4 or 5. And I remember taking him into the bank, and when they told us no, Corey, the cutest little thing, he says, "Bye-bye." And I said, "That's exactly what we're doing with all of our accounts."
Give me all my
That's
money
what you
right
do.
now.
Wow.
So then I started the process of trying to find venture capital, right?
Okay.
But we
And
know that most VC money goes to, I would say, men, and probably Caucasian men, maybe South Asian men, at least in Silicon Valley. So
well,
how would you, as a Black woman in Dallas, get VC money?
so remember I was telling you what I would tell my 20-year-old self about not being so naive?
Yeah.
Yes.
This was one of the lessons, right? Because here I am thinking I'm successful. My balance sheet was decent. My income statement had been pretty consistent over time, and I thought, I've got a project. I know that we're going to be successful. We've been successful before. This one was actually a joint venture that we had teamed up with a larger GC firm. I mean, it's like everything should have just fallen into place, right? But it wasn't. And it's like, well, why isn't it? And I remember a dear friend had told me, fast forward, and I'll come back to Warrior Construction when I had my other business, CASPR. and she had a business as well. And she told me when she was trying to raise capital, and she would do pitch after pitch after pitch, and she kept being denied. And someone finally told her, a white man,
guy.
a white guy told her, he said, look, because she wanted him to look at her pitch.
Yeah.
And he told her, I don't need to look at your pitch. I know it's solid. I know it's great. He said, your pitch is not the problem.
It's who's pitching it.
Yeah.
The pitch is who you're pitching it. That's the problem.
Got it.
And so, I didn't know at the time that I was the problem. And so I finally found, God always sends angels right at the perfect time. And I found a woman who's still a very, very dear friend of mine. And she introduced me to another woman by the name of Whitney Johns Martin. And Whitney at the time, she and a few other ladies had formed a company called Texas Women's Venture Fund.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And
So
this
what
is in
year
the
is it?
90s? Is it late 90s?
This was in early 2000s at this point.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Texas Women's Venture Fund, they were only funding and supporting women-led and women-owned businesses. Literally just finished a round of funding for another company. They were getting ready to go out and look for other companies to be able to support. And
There you are.
here I am.
Right at the right time.
Marilyn introduced me to Whitney, and we went through the process, and the rest is history.
Can I
That's
interrupt
beautiful.
you for a moment? Because what I'm hearing really is the importance of relationships and having both mentors and advocates and people that you can call within your industry and outside of your industry. Could you kind of talk about the importance of that?
Oh, sure. I mean, literally, I would tell you that, I was at the time, I was a member of the Minority Business Council, the Women's Business Council, NABO, and I sat on the board of Dallas Regional Chamber. And through all of those organizations and even more, the importance of creating relationships of people that you can literally just pick up the phone and call. It goes a long way. I just had a conversation with my husband just this morning. He was trying to solve a problem, and I said, "Well, why don't you call this person over here? You've known them for years. They probably have some contacts." And it's all about relationships. I remember a woman with the Women's Business Council told me that people do business with people that they know and they like. But then she also added, they know, they like, and they trust.
Trust. And
So if someone knows you and they like you and they feel that they can trust you, if you pick up the phone and call them, they're more than happy to make an introduction or connect you to whatever it is that you need. And so I was very fortunate to have some really great contacts in my life.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing story. And so you built the company and then you got the funding. And at what point did you move to, I know you also, I want to talk about so much more that you've done. So I don't want to, I know you've launched Warrior Elements, which was a luxury brand. And then you mentioned CASPR. Can you tell us how those transitions transpired?
So when I started Warrior Elements, I was looking for something. So my passion, while I love construction and I was really, really good about it, it wasn't something that I'm really passionate about, right? And so I wanted to find something where I could marry the two of those. And so I'm a certified trainer through Cooper Aerobic Center. I'm a health coach through Integrative Nutrition. And I thought, I've done marathons, I've done fitness competitions that were natural. And I thought I was seeing women that were in leadership positions that were sacrificing, taking care of themselves for the company that they work for.
Or their family, I
or
will
their
say.
or their
Mhm.
family.
Other
And,
Everything else.
if we don't take care of ourselves first,
Yeah.
Mhm.
then we really can't be there for
Mm.
everyone else.
Others. Mhm.
And as doctors, you know this already, and you've
Mhm.
probably told this to several of your patients. I would tell my clients, you have to take care of your body now so that when we get
Can't
older,
wait.
it will take
Yes.
care of you later.
Mhm.
Yes.
And so think about, I would give the example of a car. We're not going to run our car. Well, now we've got electric, whether it's electric or hybrid or the old fashioned oil and gas. You're not going to run that car over and over and over without doing a checkup, without having the oil change, without putting gas in it every week. And to me, gas is a fuel, the food that we put in our body. So junk in, junk out. And so, I wanted to be able to have a platform to show women that, you know, sometimes there's a debate. Sometimes people say you can have it all, and sometimes people say you can't have it all. I think you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once.
At the same
Same
time.
time.
Right.
Yes. Our philosophy. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yes.
But so what would you say, or what do you say to women who are, highly successful, marriage, children? How do you balance that and, get the health part in as well? And really, how do you prioritize that?
So it's a choice, right?
Yeah.
And there's boundaries that you
Yes.
have to set for yourself. So example, when I was running my construction company and Corey, my son, was little, there were times where, and so my office, to give you, so let's say my office was on one side of town, but home was at least without traffic 45 minutes away.
Mhm.
And so there were times where if I had, let's say I have an RFP, request for proposal, that needed to go out, I'm picking him up from school, which his school was near the office, and I'm bringing him back to the office, had a little corner set up where, his toys, his little table to do homework.
Mm.
And we would stop at Boston Market
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. I
get a
Remember
rotisserie
Boston Market?
chicken.
Get your vegetables.
Right, get the vegetables,
Corn.
I'd let him have the mac and cheese sometimes, as long as he ate his green beans, and, but we weren't going to the McDonald's. We weren't going to
Mhm.
get the fried chicken. We were going to get a healthy meal.
Mhm.
And we'd go into the office cafeteria, and we'd sit down together and we'd eat it as a family. And then he'd come back into my office and he'd do, his homework or play games until I was finished. And so
Yeah.
so that's a choice.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
he had to, I had to leave the house super early. My workouts then were typically at 5:30 in the morning, right?
And that's a
But
choice.
that was a choice,
Yes.
and it wasn't a choice I always liked, but,
Mhm.
I knew how important taking care of myself was.
Yes. Yeah.
And, so there were choices in that. Phone calls, conference calls, I typically would not do a conference call before 8:30 or 9 a.m.
Okay.
If someone wanted me in front of them at 8 a.m., they better have a really good reason, because there were so many other things that were important for me that I really needed to do. And to me, there's a book, and I'm see if I can remember it correctly. The Power of a Positive No, right? And
Oh, a
so,
positive no. The
No,
power of
the
a
I like
power
that.
of
positive
a
no.
positive no.
Okay.
And so I learned to try to, master how to say no, but in a
Mm.
way where it wasn't offending people or
Sure.
wasn't hurting people, but it was just putting my needs and my family's needs
Mhm.
first.
Yeah. And I was just talking to the client about this. Is it then if you do it yourself, then those around it gives permission for those around you to do it for themselves as well. And
Exactly.
as a leader, that's what you're. Yeah. Yeah. Got it. So again, in interest of time, I want to talk about all the things all these positive things that you've done, but I love the health. As a matter of fact, I do remember very keenly when I saw you, again, we were just in passing when our kids were younger. You had your workout clothes on then. and, and had come from a workout. So I was like, yeah, she's doing the things. So tell us what drew you to co-found CASPR Technologies and the healthcare technology field. How'd you get there?
CASPR came along. So, I'm doing my thing, working with women, had my athletic line that I was selling at Equinox and Tootsie's and some other local stores in Dallas. And I'm just, having a great life. And then I met this incredible man. Thought I was never, ever going to get married again. Been there, done that. Had already checked the box. It was like, I'm living the single life, raising my son, and we were good. And I met this wonderful man. His name is Christoph, Dr. Sushi. And he was in Dallas. So short version, he was from France, moved to Dallas from Spain, and he was looking
Frenchman.
I know, that's what I'm thinking. Okay.
So, look, I always
whole
say he had
podcast
me
on
at
that.
oui, oui.
Yes.
Bonjour.
Love it.
And so we met. It was Super Bowl weekend,
Mm.
and we hit it off. He was looking to move to Dallas. He had just bought a company, or acquired part of a company in Dallas, and we started dating. And I started learning about this technology that he'd been selling
Okay.
internationally for almost 20 years at that point. And the name of that company is RESPR, RESPR. And so the more I got into it, so it is a air and surface disinfecting technology.
Huh.
And the more I got into it and learned more about it, I said, well, why aren't you selling this to hospitals? I mean, every hospital around the world should sell this technology. And, and then, and as doctors, you'll appreciate this, I was looking at the number of HAIs that were hospital-acquired infections
Okay.
that were happening in the US every
That's a
single
lot.
year. It's a lot. That number, well,
Absolutely.
pre-COVID, it was over 75,000 a year, I believe. And that does not include, and these are people that would pass away, and that does not include people that might lose a limb or something.
Sure. Right.
HAI.
Sepsis.
We have a friend that happened to lives in California, and so I thought, this technology is amazing. This will really help hospitals reduce the number of HAIs that they have in the hospital. So we went around, we formed CASPR. Funny story is it was actually birthed because I didn't know what I wanted the name of the company to be. So we're literally sitting around, brainstorming on names, having a glass of wine, maybe
Or
two. And it's October 31st.
Oh, Casper the Friendly Ghost.
And CASPR was born, literally.
Nice.
And so CASPR stands for Continuous Air and Surface Pathogen Reduction. And so we wanted to help hospitals to reduce HAIs. And so in order to do that, you can't just go and sell something into a hospital. They want to know, show me your data.
You need the data.
Show me your evidence-based science that this really worked. And so we went through almost a year of doing a couple of pilots in 2 different hospitals to gather that data. So that was, so we launched the company in 2017.
Oh, that's perfect timing.
And then, and so then we took about 2 years to do gather data. And so we went to APIC conference in 2019, Association of Professionals of Infection Control. And we went to a conference in 2019, and we had, all of the nurses were like, oh my God, where is this? Because it's continuous. It's no touch. And they were like, "Where have you been?"
Mm-hmm.
And so we were getting ready to do a really large pilot with
Mm-hmm.
a very large teaching hospital in LA.
Okay.
And March of 2020
We shut
happened.
down, yes.
Perfect
Mhm.
timing.
And
Wow.
well, yes and
Well,
no.
no, but you can get in there
Mhm.
You
at that
couldn't,
point.
I mean, you
Okay.
couldn't get into a
A hospital.
hospital
Yeah.
at that
To
time.
prove.
And
Wow.
so here we were,
You have
ready
something to save you, and
to
you can't
say,
get there.
well, we couldn't get into a hospital.
Right.
And
Wow.
so I was like, okay, now what?
Mm-hmm.
So we did a pivot. And we had internal salespeople at that time, and our pivot was to pivot to a distribution model. And so we started partnering with HVAC companies
Mm-hmm.
around the U.S.
Yeah.
We're selling HVACs to or maintenance to school systems, to
Oh,
airports,
Right,
to
right.
restaurants, to
yes.
church, to mass transit. And
Mm-hmm.
so while we couldn't get into hospitals, we could get
Mm-hmm.
everywhere else.
Okay.
And we were deemed to be a business that was of necessity.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
And so we were able to, fly to
Stay
wherever
afloat.
we
Wow.
wanted to, and we started selling through a distribution model.
Wow. Amazing. Okay. Very interesting. And so are you currently still in business?
So I sold the
CASPR?
CASPR was sold and acquired by our largest distributor, which
Okay.
is in Louisiana,
Okay.
and they are still running CASPR. The joys. There's a song "Joy and Pain."
Yes.
Like
Yes.
sunshine and rain.
Frankie Beverly and
Yep.
Mays,
Yep.
absolutely.
But there were a lot of joys, and there was a little bit of pain. I would say
Mm-hmm.
the biggest pain points for me and running CASPR. So with CASPR, I was a CEO and chairman of the board. And that
Yeah.
was the first time I had a company where I had independent directors. And we actually had some of our independent directors were shareholders. We had done a couple
Mm-hmm.
of raises, and our shareholders, we had 2 shareholders that were on our board, and then we had another shareholder that we had selected. And the hardest part for me was one night when I'm finishing up with my team the board book because I had a board meeting the next day,
Uh-huh.
and we're trying to get the board book out, to all the directors.
Yes.
And one of my directors, who was also a shareholder, called me up that afternoon and he says, "Hey, I want to come by and talk to you for a little bit." And I said, "Sure." I said, "We'll be here for a while, so come on by." He came by right at 5 o'clock. It was a short conversation, and he gave me a letter. And
Mm.
the letter said that, in short, that he and a couple of the other shareholders
Lost.
had gotten together and wanted me to
Wow.
resign as CEO and wanted me to resign as chair of the board and wanted me to make that announcement at the board meeting the next morning.
So that's how that works.
It's an
Wow.
ambush.
Yep.
Total ambush. Total ambush.
Wow.
And if I resigned and also give up part of my shares so that I would not own the majority of the company, then the other shareholders that had basically been in cahoots with him would have given us the all of the money. We were in the middle of getting ready to do another raise.
Mhm.
And so they would then put in the money that we were seeking to raise under these conditions that I would
Mhm.
basically bow out and leave the organization.
Oh my goodness.
So they just
Well,
basically came in. That's a raid.
They tried.
great.
They tried. And
They tried.
so I spent the better part of that evening on phone calls,
Calling the other
relationships
people.
of
Yes.
Yes.
lawyers
Yes.
that I knew that could help me figure out what the response was going to be at the board meeting the
Mhm.
next morning. And so the next morning comes, I ran the board meeting as normal.
I know you had your best suit on. You had your power shoe. Your
I'm
hair was did.
imagining
You were looking flawless.
I'm imagining Suits right now, Sylvia. It's like-
Yes.
So I, ran the meeting. I'm at the end of the meeting, and I said, by the way, I need the rest of the board to know that I have received this letter. I'm in receipt of the letter. I've read it, and I do not have a response that I'm going to give you today, but I have retained a lawyer, and we will be looking at this in further detail, and I'll get back to you.
FAFO.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. They had completely underestimated you.
This is like a whole episode of Suits. I'm loving it. Sorry. Not for your pain, but for your insight. I mean, honestly, just being on the outside, looking in, that to me, it's so many things. And what you've said, it's, getting ready to always be ready. It's moxie. It's resilience. It's just, honestly, I just have to say Black excellence up close and personal, right in our faces. So I'm loving your story. Would love to know how it ends, but however you want to proceed.
Well,
But
it ended, in short, it ended, I did not, I resigned as the CEO. I did not resign as the chairman of the board. I put together a committee where we actually did a search for a CEO that we wanted, not their CEO. The person who was a shareholder and board of director, we had him to resign because he was in one of the founders' seats. And so, as being in one of the two founder seats on the board, we asked him to resign from the board. We ended up raising money through, the hustle way, by hook or by crook. But we found it. We found the money. It wasn't everything that we actually needed at the time, but an amazing CEO that I worked with very, very well, and was still, part of the day-to-day operations and chairing the board. So until we were acquired by our distributor in Louisiana.
love that story.
Question for you. Someone calls you with that same scenario today. What's the best piece of advice that you can give them?
Be prepared. And I can't say, listen to what people say, but then also listen to what people don't say. So, this didn't happen overnight, right?
No.
Right.
And so, so you always have to be on your toes. And I think as Black women, we're always ready to be 2 steps ahead all the time, right? Because it's just how we're raised. We're always having to block and tackle something somewhere, whether it's in the office or at home. And so in some ways, I think we're used to that. And so when adversity, comes our way, then the first thing that we do is say, okay, this has happened. Now, how do I find a solution?
Exactly.
Right. We don't have the time nor the luxury to say, oh, woe is me, and, kind of, sit around and weep on the issue for days at a time. It just, so my first MO was, okay, this is how you're going to play it. And now I got to find the solution.
You got to circle the wagons. Absolutely.
So, because I knew I was not going to give up my company. That was a non-negotiable. And so I think, one of the other things I would say is to know what your non-negotiables are, right?
Yeah.
So
very, very good. Great advice.
Thank you.
Advice. Well, we could have 2 or more episodes, but we want to honor your time. And, through all your wildly successful ventures that you've done and, raising a family, I know now that you are in Panama and you have a business, Global Citizen Consulting. And Sylvia and I, both being travel buffs, her much more experienced than I, would just love to hear about this venture. And I think definitely the listeners would really love to hear about it. So can you give us more insight?
Sure. So Global Citizen Consulting is really about helping people create their global life plan, right?
Mm.
And so that became very important for me. I think on hindsight, I think in the back of my mind, it started really when my dad passed at an early age, because he and my mom used to always talk about when they retired, they were going to go here and they were going to go there. And they did a few vacations, family vacations. And I think there's one that I remember they did to Hong Kong without kids. It's the only vacation I think they did without kids. But everything else was going to be after retirement. And after retirement never came for my dad.
Mhm.
And so that was the first influence. And then the second influence was during COVID, when once the world started opening up again and, we could come out of our homes. Well, my husband and I, we wanted to travel. And I thought, let's just go to France. That's where his family, his sister and niece and nephew, he could go, but I couldn't. The US passport. And I couldn't get into France at that time. If you remember, right when the world was opening, other countries, because of how the US was dealing with COVID, other
COVID rates
countries
were
were
really
basically
high.
saying, you're off
You
limits.
can't come.
We don't
Yes.
want you.
Yes.
And so we said, well, where can we go? And so we went to Mexico. And Mexico, we stayed for a week. That ended up turning into 3 weeks. And I said, you know what? When everyone was working via Zoom. Remember, that's really the only only way you could work. Everyone's working from home. Kids were going to school from Zoom.
Yes.
And I thought, we have always talked about when we retired, we are going to. I said, why are we waiting?
Right.
I said, let's figure out where that's going to be now. And so literally he created a list. I created a list of what was important for each of us. And then a Latin American country came to the top of the list. We came to Panama in October of 2020 just to check it out. We were here for a month and fell in love with everything about Panama. So for me, it was the weather, it was the diversity of the people, it was the ease of being able to get back to the US because I was still running my company. It wasn't a big difference from a time zone perspective. They use the US dollar. It's a pretty stable economy. We've got the Panama Canal. It was
I
just
think healthcare is pretty good in Panama as well.
Healthcare is amazing here. We've got private healthcare, and it's way less than anything we've ever paid for in the US. I don't have copay. I have the phone numbers of all of my doctors. And so it
We're
was.
not going to let that get out.
And how difficult is citizenship? Are you a citizen dual?
So I'm a resident.
Resident.
I'm a resident of Panama. And then I also have 2 passports in other countries. And
Nice.
so the goal for us was to be able to create a global life plan so that we can travel and move about the country where and when we needed to. I also moved all of my U.S. investments overseas. So I formed an LLC company and moved my IRAs and my 401ks overseas, where I have more self-directed, where I have more control in
Yes.
in how it's invested. And
your business is showing others how to do this as well?
so what we do is now we create global life plans for other people. So
Okay.
we do a very detailed interview of because everyone's goals are different.
Sure.
So we take everyone through a very detailed process of what it is that they're looking for. And we challenge them on some things that they really, because people say that I want to go live in another country. But what does that really look like when you get down to the nitty gritty?
Sure.
Is this something you want to do for the rest of your life? If that's the case, then what are you going to do when you pass on and you have either real estate or other investments that you need to pass on? to family members. And so we help walk them through what estate planning and inheritance taxes may look like. So we have now a team of real estate experts, lawyers, and investment people around the globe that we worked with to help people put together their plans.
Wow. Gail, we are going to have you back.
Yeah, no
to
doubt.
simply have a conversation
So
about
much to talk about.
about a global life plan. I literally was talking with my financial planner today about, well, am I going to live internationally? What does that look like? How do I do it? So this is so timely. So thank you for sharing.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
no doubt. And we would love to ask you so many more questions. So fascinating. But one of the things I have a feeling I know some of these things based on what you've already given us in terms of what's important to you and your health. But can you give us a little bit of what your self-care and your wellness routine looks like now at this point in life?
So my self-care still includes workouts every morning, not at 5:30 a.m.
Nice.
It still includes eating, very healthy. I probably have a little bit more wine than I did, 20, 30 years ago, but I'm reaching that sixth floor, so I figure I'm okay. But it also still includes drinking, a
Water.
ton of water daily. And I can't stress the importance enough of water, particularly I think once we get to that which everyone's talking about now, the menopause age.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it totally wreaked havoc on my body and the whole all of it. Was saw a video this morning on Instagram actually, and I can't think of the woman it was, but she listed like 1,000 symptoms for menopause. I think she went through at least 20, and I thought, hey, I'm not crazy.
You are not.
No, we know so much more now, and there's so much more information readily available. So that's great.
But I think,
But water's
as I get older, I would tell when I was younger, I would tell people, take care of your body then so that it takes care of you now. And now that I'm at that now phase and hopefully it'll still, at least another 20, 30 years from now if I'm fortunate, and if it's God's will. But strength training, weight training is still super important for me. Eating right and just having time to rest.
nice.
Rest and detox and just be thankful and grateful for life every single day.
And I'm sure your natural ocean sounds as opposed to my ocean sounds on my app basically help you, I guess, in your regimen as well. So
Yes, yeah, I get to see the ocean
nice
every day.
Gail Warrior,
I can't thank you enough. Yes,
thank you.
Thank
Where
you both.
can
This has been
people-
fun.
Where can our listeners find you for the global life planning? A global citizen.
So they can set up a 45-minute consulting free. We do the first consulting call is free, and that's on our website at globalcitizenconsult.com. So GLOBAL citizen without the S consult.com. Right.
Okay, good. And we'll put that in our show notes. Wonderful. Absolutely. Well, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for taking out time today.
Anytime.
You're an inspiration, and I know listeners will really love all aspects of your interview. And we wish you well on your wellness retreat there in Panama. And until we meet again, may you be well.
Okay. Same. Okay. Bye, lady.
May you be well.
Thank you.
Okay, Sylvia, what a gift. That was just
Amazing.
packed with so much information and life and advice. And I was just in awe of all the things that Gail Warrior has been able to accomplish at this stage in life and is now reaping the rewards of such hard work, right?
She is a superstar. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so we were honored to have her. Curious to know what your takeaways were. I'm sure there are many.
There were so many jewels. Gail talked about the importance of relationships, the
Mm.
power of a positive no. I'm working on the positive part of my no's. And, as you heard, just being a global citizen and helping people develop their own global life plans. Those were, I think, the most things that really resonated with me, and I know are going to resonate with our listeners. What about you?
Agree with everything you said. I think one thing that we talked about in the introduction, she had a mentor early, or she spoke about
Yes.
the mentor early, and I think that's valuable when you're trying to make career decisions or have the little bit of encouragement to do something, other than what you're currently doing. Maybe give you some perspective there. I think that we can't undervalue that. She didn't say this, but what rung out to me or rang in my ears the entire time as she was talking is the concept of, get ready to get ready to stay ready.
You don't have to get ready if you stay ready.
If you stay, I mean, she's just a perfect example of
Yes.
that. From going from each step in her career, even to the point where she was talking about somebody wanting to take over her company. She was ready. She was
They
already
tried to
ready.
take her stuff, Angela.
Yeah, ready for that. So, very, that resonated with me. And I think the last thing, which, because she is passionate about being healthy and taking care of yourself, is that, your health is a choice. The things that you do, it's a choice. And, there are choices that we have to make on a daily basis. And the concept of taking care of yourself now so your body will take care of you later. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So anyway, it's been a day. It's been what a powerful interview, and that will definitely carry me for the week. So I'm grateful,
As am I. May you be well.
and may you be well. And to our audience, if you would love, like, and even subscribe, we'd appreciate it. And please feel free to give us feedback or any advice on or recommendations of what you'd like to hear next. Thank you.
That's a wrap on another episode of Boss Leap. May this conversation enlighten your path toward personal growth and professional empowerment. For more thought-provoking and eye-opening discussions like this one, head to our website at bossleappodcast.com. Always remember to celebrate your wins and trust yourself. A positive mindset can push you out of your comfort zone and into far greater heights. Until next time, may you be well.
Before we go, there's one more thing the lawyers have asked us to include. It's the legal language. And you know how doctors love lawyers. This podcast is presented only for educational and entertainment purposes. Although we are doctors, on this show, we are just your friends. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. Understood? Awesome. We'll see you in the next episode.